Okay, it works. Maybe need that with the accent, sorry. Yeah, I'm Laurent Lacorre from Pixit Media. We are a storage solution, mostly a file system, a software-defined solution. And the solution we are providing, it's what you see in the middle in red, it's Pixstore. That's when Pixstore, it's mostly a file system. The idea initially it's to be able, in fact, to provide a file system, a storage solution that can do any type of, can apply to any type of workflow you may have into a post-production or any type of workflow. It could be playback, sustained workflow. That's been where, in fact, you need to do a very fast single stream playback to resolve baseline, flame, and things like that. And as well also any type of aggregate workflow, which is more around what you do with the VFX or the Premiere or transcoding and things like that. But bring that into a single namespace and try to avoid to have all of this island of storage and be able, in fact, instead of having to duplicate content between the different islands that you have over fiber channel, traditionally for the high-end stuff, and IP, in fact, for the rest, and be able, in fact, to deliver all of this into a IP storage workflow. Quickly on the value proposition, because I don't think the Pixstore is really the most interesting part here. We could go a bit more later if you had some question about it. But quickly, the value proposition, the idea is to build a solution that can bring all of this workflow into one single namespace and have a very predictable storage. It means to be able to, because one of the issues often you have, in fact, with traditional storage, it's fragmentation, it's performance degradation over time and things like that. The idea is to say, okay, let's figure out a way, in fact, to provide a solution that on the storage side, it's easy, it works, we guarantee the performance over the life of the system, and that works. We design the solution for all of the different workflow you have. And we deliver that over IP. But when we had those fundamentals, in fact, the idea was to build on top the tools to bring, in fact, some of the intelligence into the storage. So in first is to find where my stuff are. That's been be able to catalog all of the content that you have on that file system. Because you have that global namespace, could be quite large, could handle billions of files if needed, because we have also a lot of customers on the HPC side, which manage, in fact, a lot of very small files and very scalable solution. That's been the idea is really to say, okay, how we can make very efficient, in fact, to figure out where are the content on the storage, what's coming, how I can tag, but on the file system side, because the file system has that knowledge. And instead of having an asset management system that try to track the location of every file and try to discover, scan a file system, even for backup, for archiving and things like that, it's usually quite painful to really go through that file system and figure out where are my stuff, what's new, what's modified, and things like that. That's been what we did, in fact, leveraging, in fact, some very powerful tools from the file system. In fact, we built an Elasticsearch database where we catalog everything happening on the file system. And for analytics as well for search capability. We have a UI where you can do search, proxies. There is some plugin where you can do some machine learning AI to add some extended metadata, things like that. But really the idea is to not have to scroll the file system and have an immediate access to that content. So that's for the main, and that's what we have, and I'll go a bit quickly on the search. I have a few slides on the search capability. But I think also what's interesting is that we have a lot of requests to say, okay, now fine, I have my local site, have my how I extend this to to some remote or to the cloud, and how I work, in fact, in collaboration between these different sites. There is always, and we have that capability to do that caching, that's been where, in fact, we can extend the file system into a remote site. The challenge with that, it's great when you are on a campus because there is no much latency between the different sites, and it's easy. There's been everybody, it's in sync, the metadata are in sync, and everybody can see and access everything. No collision between files, it's great. But when now you get in, across continents or even between East Coast and West Coast, the latency, you start to get a lot of latency and doesn't work anymore. Or you have to be very detailed on how the workflow works and who access when content to make sure, in fact, you don't have those collisions. So what we build into that file system, it's an ability, in fact, to do a staging outside. That's been in the HSM tools. That's been mostly that take any content from the file system and can push that content outside that file system. Could be POSIX target, could be S3, object storage. There's been a lot of different ways to do that. That's the first idea. Is like, okay, can we just push that content into a centralized point? It could be a cloud, let's say a cloud bucket where you put that content. And now how my remote site, where I have also a big store cluster, can be, I have some knowledge about what's going on and what was pushed. And what we build is what we spell the reverse stubbing. That's when the idea is to have that remote site be able to catalog the content that was pushed into a centralized point and be able to have a visual of all of those files. Now what you have two clusters that have the view of the same content, but from a centralized point. That's when you need that content, it's a pool. Instead of having that collision where, in fact, you don't know who will have will be the last one to write that file or access that file. That's when now each of those sites, in fact, will get the file when they need it. And to do that, that's when you can do through policies and do some automation. But the idea is to build an API around it, where in fact we can integrate with the tools that you build or you use that can manage all of this. So we manage to get the information from the file system and all of that Elasticsearch database. We have a Python API where you can get any type of information around the analytics, where are the files, what metadata associated to files, group files, search on the project name and get the list of files, everything where they are located, even across multiple locations. That's when you get that information, but also on a policy engine to say, okay, now have the site have the view of that content, but I need to have that content available tomorrow because someone will work on that specific remote site. That's when through the API you can say, okay, here's a list of files that need to be available in London because they will start to work on it. And when they are done, maybe around the clock, you can decide, okay, those files has to be also put into a different site that they can continue to work on. And really the optimization that we do around that has been, there is no magic about the transport of the file. The idea is really to be very specific of which file need to be shared. So you can have everybody have a view and access to this file, but you can be very surgical of which file will transfer and will be available physically on all of these sites. So and all through the APIs. That's where, in fact, company like Redesign are putting some effort. In fact, is to do that integration between the pipeline tools and our API to really move that intelligence, that's been the data movement, the knowledge of where the content resides to the file system itself, and have the application and, in fact, do what they need to do. It's who need to use that content and when and how. fact, I didn't go through the slide, I guess. Just quickly. Yes, search has been there is a UI, but it's really the idea is that a very scalable database that has all of the knowledge of what's happening. Analytics, it's really understanding what's happening, who use what, where things are, how much storage each project use, anything that you can imagine. Engineer, which is that HSM staging tools that allow you, in fact, to move content outside of that local on-premise storage. And when I say using the cloud, in fact, to do that collaboration, it could be directly cluster to cluster. That means you don't have to really use that centralized point. But another use case is leveraging an object storage with the geo replication. So now you can have multiple sites that the object storage will manage to do that transfer between and have that availability of the content locally, but the file system will have the knowledge locally of what's available and be able to access to it. Let's see, that's been we have a full documented API that we can share where in fact you can have access to the search, analytic, and all of the policy. No, and that's just a representation a bit of what we do. It's been the standard, that's been the Pixel, that's been the on-premise storage, like you will have with a StorNext or an Isolon or a Culo. That's been, and the idea is really to aggregate all of this type of storage into one namespace. Also, with the reverse stubbing, what's interesting is we can leverage also investment you already did. Let's say you have a NAS that with a lot of content already. What we can do is we can catalog and make the content available through the file system directly and use that investment you already did as a tiered storage into the solution. That global has been with engineer be able in fact to push content across different sites, and that's reverse stubbing. And then the piece of search and Meetup. That's a very quick view. I don't know if you have any if it was quite relevant, but it's it's not very sexy storage. I don't have any demo or any really things to show on a few slides, but if you have any question, I'm here to answer them.
Thank you, Laurent. Thank you. Same across multiple facilities, and what these guys did is the idea that, well, you just have one, and everywhere is just one namespace, and you go to your list of folders of projects, and there's just one list of projects. And what happens is that where that file lives is determined by a policy. And I can write tools around where that policy lives. So meaning I can connect a Shotgun and I can say, okay, at publish time, I want you to take this file and I want you to put it to, I want you to put it in this facility on the high-speed storage. And I want you to take the third version to the end, and I want to move those to super low-speed disks. Right? And then I can say that this project, we're actually moving this project to another facility. And so basically just push a button and just start a transfer of all the files over to the facility. Now both facilities have all the files. If you go to the file system, they're all there all the time. Assuming you've got privileges to see it, you can see all the files all the time. And it's like, wait a minute, suddenly it takes away, for me personally, it takes away the whole problem. Like all of the issues of how do I copy files around and how do I manage it all, it just kind of magically goes away. And it extends to the cloud. So meaning we can have S3 storage that is part of this. We can have cloud workstations that connect to that S3 storage. And it all appears to be in the same namespace. So an interesting thing for me is kind of the evolution of managing file systems to when I first started dealing with this and having one facility running one copy of Shotgun and another facility running another copy of Shotgun and having to copy files over and copy and recreate an entity from one into another. That was 10 years ago more to now having something where it's kind of like all in one. And that seems to me to be like a great future to look towards. Fran, I'd love to hear what the mill is up to.
Nothing that exciting, actually.
It's awesome. Let's take a look.
Okay, so I'm just gonna say that these notes here are just really more notes for me than for you guys. But I wanted to show you the picture. Also, I'm talking more about the asset workflow for our tools. Basically, it's very old-fashioned. They set up how they like them to be run in London, and then they just push them to all of our sites. So at the mill, we have 5 sites. The main original site is in London. The mill's been around for more than 25 years, so we have a lot of legacy, and we've mainly work on commercials and short projects right now, but we've done Doctor Who, we've worked on various films, so we have a lot of history with our files. But we're also right now in the middle of a transition from our old system, which was called Miasma, to our new system, which is an F-Track. So I'll talk about that a little bit. And right now, all of our project management is being managed from F-Track, or sometimes Google Docs if people are really old-fashioned. But for all of our main big projects are all being done in F-Track. And our F-Track, we're self-hosted, so for our main server, we are actually talking to our one server in New York, but we have local cache and media servers at each location. So our assets, every file that is going to be used, well, I should say no, every job that we're doing, which is like our main project work, gets stored in a job database, and then when we decide that we're going to sync something, somebody will do it through a manual UI. We have 2 different UIs, one for the producers and one for the artists. And then whatever that file is, like whatever that piece of work, like if it's roto, layout, animation, whatever, the path to where that file lives will get noted into the job DB. And then we have a cron that just runs every 5 minutes to add our paths to the sync queue database. And so that's what this picture is over here. It's basically Mill Commander and Loop are our 2 different programs that people use. They say, okay, I want to sync this thing, whatever my thing is, and it could be something like the animation Maya files, the effects Houdini files. It goes in the job DB, and the job DB just keeps that collection of the things that are assets. And then when somebody says, okay, I want this thing to be synced, they say, sync this thing, and it just goes into the sync queue database. So in this example, we've got LA and London. And so if I'm doing it in LA, I'm going to say, okay, I want to sync this to London. And so the person will actually have to choose where they want to sync it. So I could choose to sync it to all 5 locations, but usually we're only working with 1 or 2 locations at a time. I should say 1 or 2 other locations besides LA. And so in the old days, which was kind of like last year, we just had a straight rsync. It was just basically a list of things to sync, and the rsync went through and did that. But unfortunately, it was prone to sometimes get hung up, and sometimes I would find out 2 weeks later that it hadn't been running for 2 weeks in LA. And you'd think people would notice that they hadn't been getting their files, but it depends on what they were doing. TDs who are smart enough to just go and get their own files. But anyway, so I went and I talked to our engineering guy, and he put it into Aspera, and it's been much more stable since then, and also they call him and not me. So that makes me happy. And also makes all of R&D happy, because if I wasn't there, they'd be calling my boss. But basically our cron runs every 5 minutes, and it runs on each local Aspera server. And so each location runs a daemon, and it just says, okay, is there something in this list I haven't processed already? And if so, it just says, okay, I need to process that, and it will pull. And so we've always had it where each location pulls to their location. So if London wants to send me something and I'm in LA, LA goes, is there anything from London? Okay, go pull those things, and it just pulls that list. And we have a priority, because the other thing that would happen is sometimes people do things like they dump a bunch of background plates online, and the plates are quite large, and before you know it, nobody else is getting their stuff synced because there's too many background plates getting synced for a few hours. Or I think one time, the longest I've ever seen was, it was over 24 hours of syncing, and it completely saturated our network, and everybody's like, why is everything so slow? And that was why. I mean, literally, it's just add that list, add whatever the directories that are going to go into the database.
In that scenario, how's priority? Is that also
I don't know exactly how it's being done. I've seen people arrange it, so basically there's a web page people can go to, and then they just drag the priority of what's, they say up the priority on this. So I think it's just given a number, and when it puts it in to the list into the sync queue, I think it gets a priority number attached to it and does it in that order. Yeah, but I mean, it's super simple. I mean, it's just basically, put this thing in the database, and then it just goes through and processes things out of the database in the order it gets it. So I think it does actually look every 5 minutes, it goes and checks. And so if something gets moved, but right now only the producers have that power. And that's because they're the only ones who know where that web page is. So that's kind of how we manage that, to keep the artists from trying to reorder things. And then when it's gone through that list, it just goes ahead and takes what it's processed and puts it into the statistics database. And all it is basically a copy of the sync queue database. And that way we can run statistics on it and find out, okay, how long did this take? How much was transferred? What's the transfer rate? And have some basic analytics to run on the things that were transferred, which in our old system we didn't have. Our old system was just straight parsing. There was nothing catching, how much throughput we've got. I think I mentioned our current asset manager, which is soon to be, the old one is Miasma. And that database syncs itself to all the sites, but it only has what sites your asset is active in, and that literally is a post process. So we do the sync with Aspera, and then there's a little post thing that says, oh, and tell Miasma that this asset is now in this site. So we do sometimes have problems where things get synced, and then people are like, oh, I can't see my asset in the asset manager. It's like, oh yeah, because we need to tell the asset manager the asset made it there. For some reason, that just never got updated. Also, we've had this happen. This has been the thing that kind of started the whole thing, getting it into Aspera and changing the way we're doing things, is that with having more and more multi-sites, we're doing more and more multi-site work. I mean, when I first started at the mill a few years back, we had occasional multi-site jobs, and we had 3 people in LA who knew how to do it, and that was it. Now almost every job has some sort of multi-site component to it. We have our Bangalore facility now, so we send a lot of work to Bangalore. Not just, mostly because we have Bangalore, we can, and we're very busy in LA, so it's really helpful for us to be able to say, yeah, we can take that big job and send it to, different people in different offices. We send a lot of work to Chicago because sometimes they're very, very busy, and then other times they're not. And so it's worked out really well for us to be able to share the work. So our new asset manager, we're actually in the process of designing that right now. Basically, we're looking to be more efficient, because when you're just doing straight, take everything in this directory and sync it, you end up syncing a lot of things. And right now, we have like a couple of areas where they're kind of a little bit of a dump area, like, oh, I need to send this to somebody, or oh, the client gave me this thing and I just throw it in there. And, you know, honestly, people in Bangalore don't care, but, you know, people maybe in the other office care. You know, like the person you're sitting next to or the person, you know, down the road, they might care, but everybody gets it whether they want it or not. So we're trying to be more efficient about how we're syncing. So we're looking at just transferring the latest version or just transferring a version specified. And the request will only ever happen once. If whatever is published, it gets published once, it gets transferred once, and that's it. And then we ran into a lot of issues like rsync versus async. They're not the same. And I'm really impressed with Mateus, our engineering manager, because he actually managed to get Aspera to actually fix some things that was kind of broken about the way that they were doing the transfer. And got some features added that, for instance, Aspera won't transfer empty directory structures. So when we first set up a job, we've got its directory structure all set up, ready to receive whatever data people want to put into it. And then maybe you're like, okay, well, I'm also going to be working with this other site, so I might as well set them up as well. And to do that, all we do is sync it to that other site. But we can't sync it with Aspera. We have to sync it with rsync because Aspera won't sync the empty directories. And then also, right now, we're rigid about what is synced. You know, we have a certain structure, the way everything is set up, like where to find various assets. And that's what we're syncing. And so not every job needs that structure, but they get it whether they need it or not, because that's how we're set up. And it's just, it was easiest for us on the developer side. You know, just give it a thing and set it to go, and we're all done. And I mean, we have more than one. We're not just like, it's not like one size fits all. We have a few different types of jobs, but, you know, basically we can't just be custom for whatever that particular job needs, which means that we're transferring more data than we need to. Right now, our job DB, it only has 2 levels of ownership. So basically, it knows like what the job is at the job level. And, you know, this is a problem when you have somebody who's working on an asset, if they're sharing an asset between sites, and then, you know, the parent site, say LA, is doing something, and then the child site wants to do something, and they get stomped on. And people have tried all sorts of crazy things like, oh, well, just version up differently, and then they won't stomp on each other, and that works great until somebody accidentally both makes version 10 in both sites, and only one of them will win. And depending on where your data is, sometimes they'll get in a vicious circle, and you can even end up with a file that gets munched because they're both trying to update at the same time because they're syncing 2 directions at the same time. It's not fun. And that like either comes to me in LA or it goes to my manager in London. Like the 2 of us, we go and deal with that. Yeah, so that's kind of how we're set up. And, you know, we're trying to keep it real simple. And I can tell you, when I was at Rhythm Infused, we had a much more advanced style of transfer, which I really miss. It was a good system, which was amazingly written in Perl, and it worked fantastic. That one had all sorts of threading, and for that one, we used 3 different types of transfer. We used FTP for the really small files, because we found out that was faster. And then we had, I think, 2 different rsync flavors, depending on the size of the file. And we would actually take big files and split them up, and then reassemble them at the other end. And it worked great. But again, you always run into the problem, like when the first time I was in Mumbai, I was talking with one of the artists, and she was saying about how I said, what are you working on? She said, oh, I'm a lighter, and I'm waiting for my lighting files. I said, oh, how long have you been waiting? Oh, well, since this morning I came in and I pulled them, and then I've been waiting, and it was 2 in the afternoon. And so that's when I realized, okay, well, we're working with India, we've got to push, because I can push at 6 p.m. But depending on what you have to transfer, like at Rhythm and Hues, we would have things like 4K textures. And at one time, I was copying things just on the local server in LA. It took 5 hours for me to copy the texture folder from one shot to another. That is just crazy. And there was a reason why we were making a copy versus just, if I had just moved it, it would have been fast, but because I had to copy it, it was super slow. And then if I was transferring it to anywhere that was not at the facility, again, it would take the same amount of time. Actually, the RC might have been slightly faster than the copy, but it still took more than 3 hours to do that. So I was not happy because it kept on, they wanted to have multiple copies because they were trying to show the director different looks for the textures. And that's it for my part.
Thank you very much, Fred.
And I've asked a couple of other people, we'll talk just a little bit about their facilities and what they're working on. If you don't mind, Tony, doing just a quick overview from Stargate Studios of how you guys have set it up. Obviously, you don't have to go into that level of detail, but if you could talk a little bit about how the workflow works and like a favorite thing that works really well and maybe something that really doesn't work well and wished you worked differently. Okay. Thank you.
I'm Tony. I work at Stargate, and we've been doing episodic TV for a long time. And when I started, we had 2 facilities, one in LA, one in Vancouver, and those were simpler times. We did everything from tape, and if they needed to work on a job in Vancouver, I'd send a tape to the guy in Vancouver and say, pull your plates and put them into the pipeline and do your VFX out there and send the tape back when you're done. So we've changed since then. And I'd say, that was simple, and simple is best until it stops working. And we've developed into a system where we can have the file in any location and render it in any other location, and I think that has been advantageous. So I guess that would count as a positive as to how our system works. It does require you to have knowledge ahead of time as to where the work is going to be done. Otherwise, you're scrambling to move it to another facility. And we basically just mirror our storage in the other facilities and make sure that the files are there by the time the artist needs it. It's all based on pushing after the data is published to our database. We use a central database in Los Angeles, and all the other facilities look at the same thing, and when they need they already have it. And I don't have anything much else to say about that. What was the other portion of this? Something that doesn't work
you
well?
don't love, something that, yeah, should work better.
I think a recurring theme here is the challenges isn't always a technological one. So, having the capability to do something is different from doing it successfully. And sometimes it's a matter of perception. I remember when we moved from having a standard HD pipeline to 4K, the idea that 4 times the data needs to go to Atlanta or needs to go to Dubai or someplace on the other side of the world is not simple. It happens slower. So managing a project and knowing how much time you need to do it isn't always easy. If you're working based on expectations of what's worked in the past, which a lot of people, that's how they operate. So I'd say, if a different time zone is in play, it could be advantageous or not, depending on when the material is ingested to the system. If the facility is geared up to work on it and they're on the East Coast, and you launch you publish a file and it gets copied overnight, then it's great because they can get started on it a few hours earlier than we can on the West Coast. And if you have a pipeline set up the way we do, where it actually renders in a different facility in LA and we post here, then by the time they're ready to leave at, say, 6 o'clock in LA time, it's towards the end of our day, we can distribute the files to the client and take advantage of a few extra hours by having I/O done out of LA, where most of the episodics are hosting. So it's but it can work to a disadvantage too if you are going the other direction and you have plates that you need to pull in towards the end of the day. The client has to turn it over until midnight in LA, and they need it the next day in the East Coast. That can be a nightmare, and it's a difficult thing to navigate. And I'd say, prioritize. Make sure that the smallest, most vital files get referred, and it really takes either a centralized management system or somebody with the skill to parse that out to get a project through successfully when things get hairy. So I don't know, am I satisfying everyone's curiosity? Does anyone have a question? Yeah.
What are you thinking? What are you using to sync?
Robocopy mostly. It's just a straight copy from one facility to another. If there's a situation where we have large back plates or something, we'll use Signet to transfer the file. But that's all done manually. So it's good in a way because it keeps an awareness of what you're doing. The small files just sort of happen, and by the time you realize you need them, they're in the location because they're all published in the database. The larger, long-form, hour-long files that we need to move, that's a more conscious effort. So.
There's something I liked about the Stargate system is you can render. You can render from any facility to any facility. So meaning you can pick one facility and you can render to any other facility, and you can actually have them race each other. So that if one of them completes first, you can have that one prevent the other facilities from rendering the same files. I thought that was a very nifty system. Is anybody else doing something like that? Cool.
RH had something like that.
It's a great idea. I think Adam would put that.
Yeah, and it's all preference group. You set up your show with the strategy you want for that given show.